Hello again, everybody. I'm going to now go on to answer the next questions, which are about Ulysses. This is just a short recap, okay? It's not anything. I mean, of course, you have a lot more notes, but just a short recap. So, I'm reading question 41 now, and that is very quick to answer. So, this is about Ulysses' parallel text, which is, of course, Homer's Odyssey. Um, we are going to talk more in detail about this later. The next question is about the main character, that is Leopold Bloom. Please remember the correct pronunciation. That is Leopold Bloom, not Leopold, as you might imagine. So, what kind of character? He embodies what we call the anti-hero. That is everyman, perfectly ordinary guy. You will find the same, or you have already found the same character in um, Italo Svevo's La coscienza di Zeno. Zeno is another antieroe, o voi forse in italiano dite l'inetto. So someone who again is not a hero, not in any way. He is not particularly attractive. He is not particularly successful. He is middle-aged and he will never ever have a chance to have a better life. He has an ordinary job, although a modern job, because he sells advertising for newspapers, which was quite a modern job at the time. The time is still 1922 when Ulysses was first published, although it had many problems being published. So an ordinary man with an ordinary job, not particularly smart, not particularly attractive. The smart and attractive one is Stephen Dedalus, not Leopold in the novel. His wife cheats on him. Molly has lovers. The most important is Boylan, but he's not the only one. And he also cheats on Molly. During the novel, throughout the novel, the novel is about his journeys through Dublin. Again, Dublin as the main setting of all Joyce's works. He also cheats on her. At least he goes to a brothel, and he doesn't in this episode, but he usually has sex with a prostitute. Yeah, if we had gone to Trieste, we would have seen the the area where prostitutes should, let's say, exercise their profession. When Joyce was living in Trieste, and the place that also gave him some ideas for Ulysses. So he embodies this modern, ordinary anti-hero everyman. The next question is quite stupid. It says, what is the narrative technique used in chapter 18, the last in the novel? Of course, the answer is stream of consciousness. You might remember that the first one to talk about stream of consciousness was um, Henry James's brother, William James, philosopher and doctor. So it's this very modern technique. And if we look at the next question, which is precisely why is it hard for the reader to follow Molly's monologue, we can say something more about this technique. Please, mind you, remember that stream of consciousness is not used throughout the novel. It's used, for example, it's used in some parts of the novel. If you check the page of contents, which you should have in your book, or at least I hope so. But anyway, you will see that there are a myriad of different narrative techniques which Joyce experimented on. But let's say the most extreme is this one. So it's not the only part, but it's perhaps the most famous part where Joyce uses stream of consciousness. So why is it difficult for us to follow Molly Bloom's monologue? Because it doesn't give us any reference in terms of, for example, punctuation. There are no signs for us to understand when a sentence ends and another one begins. So the lack of punctuation is one of the characteristics that makes it hard for us to follow this passage. Then you don't have, of course, you do have very few capital letters, which might have helped us understand where a sentence starts. Then again, you have what we call in English we call elliptical forms that are sorts of reformulations that we keep using while talking. Even now, I'm talking and I'm not reading. I'm talking as if I were in class. And so while I'm talking, I'm thinking of what I need to say, and I'm often changing, rephrasing what I say. But this is not something that you would typically do while writing, okay? You do this while speaking. And in this passage, you can see that there are lots of these elliptical forms, reformulations, rephrasings, which Molly uses. The other characteristic, which is probably the most important characteristic to define stream of consciousness, is that it is random, hypertextual. So it works with no apparent logical link. The links are probably just in Molly's mind. And this is what William James called the stream of consciousness, in terms of how a patient would talk freely, letting his thoughts flow without any order. So it doesn't have any order. It reproduces what happens in the mind, in a person's mind. So this is just Molly Bloom's mind. And this is, of course, what makes it hard for us to follow it. The next question is about the comparison between Molly and Penelope. Of course, if Ulysses is based on Homer's Odyssey, the characters are also modeled, the three main characters are modeled on characters in Homer's epic. Leopold Bloom would be Ulysses, traveling as an anti-hero, not throughout the seven seas, and not having exceptional, marvelous adventures, but traveling through, walking through the streets, not always walking, but mainly walking through the streets of Dublin and going to the chemist's to buy some cream for his wife. So no heroic deeds. Molly, well, let's say something about Stephen first. Stephen Dedalus is younger, so he is modeled on Telemachus, the son. Ulysses' son, the only one who has a chance. He will have a chance to escape paralysis, to escape Dublin's labyrinth. And it's not by chance that he is an artist, someone who is educated, someone who he's a teacher, but also a writer, someone who understands perhaps better than other people, and the only one who's given a chance of escaping, surviving paralysis. Molly, instead, is the wife, so Penelope. Molly resembles Penelope in many ways. She's fascinating, she's attractive, she's sexy, I don't know whether Penelope was so sexy though. She is a kind of Mother Earth. She represents the feminine principle. She is welcoming. Of course, she also has lovers, and that is what makes her different from Penelope. She's an ironic Penelope. So, in the same way as Leopold is an ironic Ulysses because he's an anti-hero, Penelope, Molly is an anti heroine. She's not. She's an ironic Penelope because she not only does she cheat on her husband, whereas Penelope in Odyssey was um, the symbol of faithfulness, but she's also very ordinary and uh, everyday. The other thing which is similar, on the contrary, I mean, in which you can where you find similarities between Penelope and Molly, is the ending of the novel. The novel's end is a reunion. And Leopold has come home, and although they have a lot of problems, you can see that in Molly's thoughts in her monologue. Nevertheless, despite that, she says yes, and she says yes to him, to love, to memories, to life, but also to their final reunion. So, no matter how many problems they had, they are going to stick together, which is more or less what happens. It's something that is very similar to what happens to Ulysses and Penelope in Homer's Odyssey. Right. The last question is about Eliot and Joyce. And the question is why is using the mythical method so important according to T.S. Eliot? You need to check the file that is about the mythical method according to T.S. Eliot, the file where you have Eliot's quotes. There was an essay called Ulysses, Order and Myth, which we didn't read, but you can read by yourselves, in which Eliot said that the mythical method was the only method possible in the modern times. And the method that James Joyce used in Ulysses. What does this mythical method consist of? It consists of in basing the modern on tradition. As you might remember, tradition is so important to the modernists, and Joyce was no exception. And Eliot was praising Joyce for using Odyssey as uh, scaffolding, un'impalcatura for his Ulysses. So characters which are counterparts of Homer's Odyssey's characters, different chapters, different parts. It is divided into different parts in the same way as Odyssey. The last part where Molly's monologue come from is called Nostos, Ritorno. That is the homecoming, same as happens in Homer's. So it's a scaffolding for making the modern world possible again, for giving order to disorder. So the myth, tradition, are used for controlling chaos, the chaos of modern civilization. So, in the same way as Eliot used some myths, like the Fisher King or the Holy Grail's legend, in the same way, Joyce uses Homer's tradition as a parallel text to give order to modern disorder. So I hope this was of use. You know that I will be available for you and answering your questions tomorrow afternoon. just text me and I'll be there for you. Okay. I'll see you after Easter when I'll start teaching you Virginia Woolf. Bye bye.